Good morning, everybody. It is Friday, February 15th, and I am going to give you guys a few earnings picks for today, as well as go over the picks from yesterday and the day before, and just kind of talk through some of the trades that I took, as well as some that I missed and that didn't work out. So we'll go over first the earnings picks for today, and then I'll get into some of the trades from yesterday and holdings from the day before. Okay, so overall, the market still kind of meandering around the 200-day moving average. We talked about it closing above the moving average after just a day and a half of a pullback. So it is a little bullish. Resuming this upward trend hasn't really kind of really made any dent in this trend. So again, the target is probably up here around this blue line, the pivot, which is you know the top of this consolidation area. So right around here, this pivot, or even it could go up to the 2800s, low 2800s, which is the top of these two prior highs right here. So that's the overall market. Let's get into the earnings plays for today. So we've got NVIDIA. NVIDIA is, you know, a pretty volatile stock in general over the course of the past year. You see this; it's had some really big drops and gaps, um, on news and on earnings. It has been in this kind of basing pattern for a few months. Kind of lower highs still though, but it has had some a higher low over the course of the past couple of months. If you take a look at this basing pattern at the bottom, you'll see there's this higher low, a lower low, and then a higher low. So that's kind of a little basing pattern. Maybe it would start moving up out of this base. And earnings, you can see on the left here, really did give it the momentum it needs to get out of this basing pattern. So right now, the stock sits at around 164, which is going to be right around here. So it it has a couple of different moves it can make. I mean, it did spike all the way to the 168.88 level, which is right almost at this pivot, just below the pivot right here, which is the top of the basing pattern. So if it's strong off the open, it could at least go back all the way up to the overnight high of 168.88, or that 170.23 pivot, and it could potentially show some resistance there. It's had a lot of upgrades this morning. We'll put a pivot here as well at the top of this area. It's actually 174.68, which is the little spike high right there, that one bar. Usually I would ignore that bar just because it's kind of out of out of the range and um, an outlier there. But we'll put a pivot there too as well. So showing some strength. If it shows some strength here, it could get up to the 170.23 level, or even all the way up to 174.68. Then it has this gap to fill all the way up to 195. So depending on how strong it is, Nvidia could fill this gap in the next coming days. I don't know if it'll do it today, but it has the potential because it's gotten a few upgrades as well. Um, Weakness, you can see I just put a pivot here around the 161.02 level, which is this high on the right side, this high right here from the last high prior to the previous gap. So it looks like in the overnight session it has come down just to that level. Actually, I didn't realize that until I put the pivot on, and it's bouncing. So if it gets back below this 161.02 level, I would look for a gap fill back down to the 155 area where it closed. I really don't know that it's going to do that, but it could. I mean, you never know. These stocks are quite volatile. Um, Nvidia has also been a part of the Bitcoin craze just because of the Bitcoin miners using their technology. And so that's one reason it's been weak over the past year as well. So we'll see. If any news comes out, in the morning, or if there are more upgrades, or somebody has some negativity, it could go down. I anticipate it's going to go up though. I don't think it's going to be falling, but you really never know. So I would expect it to kind of continue its upward trend. Maybe make it over the 168.88 level, which is the overnight high, to 170.23, which is the top of that basing pattern. So you have some opportunity if it opens right around here at 165. I mean, that's a good $4 or $5 if it does make it up there. So my play on Nvidia would probably be to the upside, and then 160, 102, I would think would be some level of support. So that's Nvidia. Let's get into the next one is Applied Materials, AMAT. So this has shown some weakness. AMAT has, and it's also been in a downtrend this year. It touched its 200-day moving average just about, and is now gapping down. It is all the way down to this. It's just down to this pivot right here at the moment. It did go a little bit below it in the overnight session to 39.50. So I would think that AMAT will continue the weakness in the morning if it does stay below this 39.94 line. So if it gets back below 39.94, I would expect it to be weak. You have a little bit of you have a couple of pivots here. The 37.38 area, as well as you've got this trend line as well. So a couple of pivots to look at to the downside for AMAT, but I would not be looking to trade this to the upside. So that's AMAT. And I believe the last one is, let's see, yeah, is ANET, which is Arista Networks. So this one's quite strong in the overnight as well. It's gone from 246, the 246 area, over this pivot, all the way up to about right here. And I would expect my thoughts on this would be that it would maybe continue to show strength, and the target would be this pivot up here of 268.86. So the only trade to be taken for me, in my opinion anyway, on this trade would be if it shows strength off the open, you can utilize this 268.86 pivot as your target. So I think those are just the three trades that I am looking for today. There aren't too many earnings left. We do want to go over what we did yesterday. There were a couple things that we were looking at. We had Activision Blizzard, which actually had earnings the other day, and we traded this stock as a swing trade. So you can see if you take a look at the 5-minute chart over the course of the past few days. hmm So this is a stock that I bought in this area here, the 44.19 area, which was the day after earnings, just over the first 5-minute high over the 43.77 pivot. Sold a lot of my position here, just at the gap. It started getting into the gap, but you can see it had two little bars spike into the gap and then started coming down. So I did sell more than half, probably 2/3 of my position here, just underneath the gap as it was coming back down. And you can see it kind of had a real volatile move. And then in the morning, yesterday, I still had the rest of my position, so I've been holding. I held the last third of my position. You can see it like push into the gap pretty hard with a lot of strength yesterday, and I had an opportunity to sell the rest of my position. So you can see here, pushed through the gap, went up, started to uh, come back down, and I did sell some of my position here, and I just had left the last little bit to run to the target, which is the gap fill at 46.58. And it did touch 46.58 and just one tick above that at 46.59, and then you can see it just had a swing high at 46.59 and then came right back down. So the rest of my position I sold actually right here as it was coming down from this from the top of this gap. So I mean, it was pretty volatile. I honestly guess I could have held it, um, the rest of my position, but I would have had to hold through all of this weakness, and I probably would have gotten stopped out right here at this 43.77 pivot. So you can see how volatile the stock was after earnings, but it did end up getting to the target that I had, which was the gap fill. I don't know. I mean, it could. You can see it actually touched the top of the gap and that trend line and just came straight down. I would still watch this stock over the course of the next several weeks, because it. I mean, it seems like this low here is somewhat of a swing low. If you take a look at the weekly chart, it's a huge bottoming tail hammer on the weekly. You can see that right there. So I would say if the next week's bar does not get below this 42.54 pivot, which is the last low right there, and you have a bar that closes up above this bar's high, which is 46.58. Well, we'll see what it does today. Um, I would look to maybe swing this stock for a longer term trade, maybe a couple of weeks, for a little movement to the upside, maybe to this trend line or this pivot. So that's Activision Blizzard. Just a thought over the course of the next several weeks. Also, we'll talk about a couple of the trades from yesterday, the ones that had earnings. We had Fossil, I believe, and MGM and Cisco. So let's go through Fossil first. Fossil, I did make a trade on. This is the one that we talked about, that it could find some if it found support here down at the lows, that it was so okay. Earnings were in the overnight, so after hours, uh, day before yesterday. It had a big spike down and went all the way to this 1303 pivot. Let's get the daily. And so what we talked about is if it could stay above this 1303 level, like if that it could act as a level of support because it was low, and it was a pivot from previously, and it was it was showing some support there in the overnight. You can see that it kind of based around this area all evening and into the morning session. So in the morning, it started to show some strength, and my thought was that if I was going to trade it to the upside, I wanted it to get over this 1360 pivot, which is this prior low here on the left hand side. You can see this right there. So I waited until it got over this line to make a trade on it, and you can see that. So as soon as it crossed over, I took a trade, and my stop was going to be the bottom of this bar that I took the trade on. So this green bar right here, and the stop would have been down here around 1341. So bought a position here. You can see it went up. It actually touched this 50% retracement right here where this oval is. It touched the 50% retracement, and I actually sold half of my position as it was coming down from this 50% Fibonacci retracement. Just because that's it's a psychological target, 50% of the move that it made in the after hours, and it started moving down from there. So I did sell half here. My stop then would still have been break even, and it did not come down to my break even. So you can see that it resumed. It kind of had this rounded basing pattern and resumed its upward momentum, and I was able to sell another part of my position at the close. I did hold on to two, and I bought options. So I bought in the money call options for this trade because you can get a lot more. So I got uh, 10 options initially, sold half, and then sold some more at the end of the day right here at the 15.15 level. And so now I'm still retaining two. And if you look at the daily, I mean there is a gap to fill. So I'm going to look for potentially if it has resistance at the gap fill, which will be 1568. I'll sell my other two calls. Otherwise, hold on to them and potentially for a, for some resistance here at the 20 moving average around 1668. So that's what I'm looking for in fossil. Turned out to be a decent trade actually, and one that I wasn't expecting to be that great. So we'll go into MGM next. So MGM actually turned out to be okay as well. It was more of a short trade that I took. I actually had sorry, it was a long trade, and I got stopped out. Apologies. I was confused a little bit on this one. So I actually was going to buy this stock long. If it had support around the 2708 level, I thought it could, move up for a gap fill, and so I did buy it over this first 5 minute high that went over the high of the day. So you have um, you know, this spike high, then it came down, and as it was coming back up and crossing over this prior high here, is when I actually got into position. It did work for a little bit, but it came kind of crashing down, and I had to sell it as it crossed through my stop, which was the low of that bar. So I did get stopped out of this position for a little loss. But I mean, that's okay. If you keep your losses kind of small and make sure you stick to your mental stops, or even put physical stops in, um, you can. I mean, you're not going to win on every trade, but you can minimize your losses, to where your winners are, of course, more valuable than your losses, and that way, you end up being profitable. So really, I mean, you're not expected to make every single trade work, and that's just impossible. So you are going to have losses, and the important thing is to know how to take that loss and not hold on to it and wait for it to recover, because that could turn into an even bigger loss. So I did get out of this position for a small, like 40 cent, 50 cent loss here in MGM. We'll also go over Yelp, which I think was also another trade that I did not do so hot in. Yep, so it didn't work out also the way I was anticipating. I thought Yelp was going to be a short as well. So I did. Let me go to the 1 minute charts. It's much more easy to see. So I got into Yelp right here underneath the first 2 minute low. It did come down, um, you know, down to 36.87, which would have been a good $2, or $1.50 or so. And I could have taken this profit. You see here there was a spike low, and it looks like a bottoming tail hammer here where that oval is, and then it started, resuming some up. I mean, starting some upward momentum. And actually, the place I should have gotten out of it was probably right after the first bar crossed up post the bottoming tail hammer. I did not get out of it then. I ended up holding it, and I had to get out break even up here. So Yelp also didn't work out too well, and you can see the stock here kind of spiked right down to a 20-day support and came up. So uh, I'll continue to watch Yelp because I really don't think it's going to get up above this trend line. So I'll look for some continued weakness in the coming days after earnings. Um, Also, we talked about Cisco. Cisco was really choppy in the morning. I wanted the stock short. Uh, I thought it would be a good short off this resistance here, this prior pivot of 49.47, and it did chop around quite a bit and ended up coming down. Didn't take a trade in it um, because it was so choppy in the morning, but it would have been a good trade if you would have gotten in it uh, even below the first 5 minute low. It was 48.78, and you could have gotten a good 50 cents, 40 cents, and it probably will still continue to the downside potentially to fill this gap. So not a lot of great trades yesterday, but the ones that did worked out pretty well. So made up for the losses. So I've given you a couple for today to look at, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. Happy trading, and we'll touch base